On today, we unveil another game based on the Quake 2 engine.
Kimberly, come in. Are you okay?
You got the power.
You're now listening to RetroGaming Radio.
Well, folks, it's been a month since our last episode of RetroGaming Radio, so we're well overdue for a show. The Flash 4 format was well accepted, although a lot of you would like to see that you could sort of fast forward through the show in case you stop listening and want to listen again later. We have heard your pleas, and each of our segments is now indexed so that you can skip forward and backwards with the little controller panel you'll now see on your Flash screen. This should help you get through the show better and let you stop and move along to the next segment anytime you feel like it. Thanks a lot for everybody who gave their suggestions and ideas. We have a really busy show this time around, and it's mostly reviews. We look at the great Digital Leisure's Dragon's Lair II Time Warp DVD video interactive game, the Intellivision Lives CD-ROM for the PC, and of course the promised return of the 8-bit Flashback. This episode we are not going to have a PlayStation review, as we mentioned on the last show. We just simply do not have the time, but we will have one on the next episode, time willing. So let's just get into the deepness of it here. We've got a lot to cover. In the 1980s video game revolution, video games were it. I mean, in the 80s, everything was controlled by video games. The arcades were swamped. People were putting just tons of cash into video games. The console market was booming. The classics like Pac-Man and Centipede and Defender all sucked like $5 billion a year from us game-playing fools. And in 1983, a new craze began. Cartoon-quality Laserdisc-powered interactive movies. And it started all with Dragon's Lair, to date one of the most remembered video games of all time. In fact, it's one of two games in the Smithsonian Institute, and it's right next to Pac-Man. Dragon's Lair and its successors have been ported to just about every computer and console ever made, including odd systems like the Coleco Atom computer, which compliments of Ron Corker, and I now have the Dragon's Lair diskette for the ColecoVision Atom, like I'll ever get to use it. In recent times, though, we've seen modern MPEG versions and some fairly quality translations of these great Laserdisc games for modern machines. But only in the last year or two have we seen these games brought to proper justice on the DVD medium. We've done reviews of Dragon's Lair and Space Ace. Please check the archives area of Retro Gaming Radio for these back episodes. Digital Leisure was kind enough to send me a copy of their latest endeavor, Dragon's Lair II Time Warp, for your DVD set-top player. For those of you who heard the last two reviews, tune out for just a bit as I bring my new listeners up to speed on these DVD video products from Digital Leisure. As you know, the Dragon's Lair series utilized a computer-controlled Laserdisc playback system to allow the player to play the interactive movie on the screen. Using animation by the famous talented Don Bluth of Secret of NIMH, American Tail, All Dogs Go to Heaven, and the upcoming Fox masterpiece Titan AE, players were taken through the castle of an evil dragon that had captured the fair princess. Blah, blah, blah. You know, it's a standard story. The basics of these games were simple. As long as you continued to tap the joystick and button in the proper sequence, the movie would not be interrupted, and you continued to see on the screen your persona doing the right thing. Now, fail to make a correct move in time or make the wrong move, and the Laserdisc jumps to the appropriate death scene and you lose a life. The logical home successor of a Laserdisc game is indeed the Laserdisc replacement format of DVD. And let me tell you, Digital Leisure has done a great job at making the transition. The DVD edition of Dragon's Lair II, as all three Bluth-inspired Laserdisc games do, comes in two formats, the DVD video for your set-top TV-only player box, and DVD-ROM for the PC DVD systems. The ROM version only works on PCs, while the video version can run on both. We are reviewing the DVD video version, since I'm a firm believer that DVD has no real practical business in a PC. There's really no support. Why on earth would you want to watch a movie on a 17-inch monitor when you have all that money wrapped up in that big screen TV? Personal outlet, what can I tell you? As with the other two titles that we've previously reviewed, Dragon's Lair 2 is played with your DVD remote control, using the arrow buttons and enter button. Preview clips of the other two games and a clip of the upcoming Fork in the Tail interactive game are also on the DVD for your entertainment. In this segment of the Dragon's Lair series, you reprise your role of Dirk the Daring, now husband of Princess Daphne, which I guess makes you Mr. Daphne. Daphne is kidnapped by the evil wizard Mordroc, and he will transform her into an evil wizard, an evil creature, if you don't get to her in time and stop him. As the name suggests, you're using a bumbling old time machine to chase Mordroc through the annals of time. Your travels take you to Beethoven's piano room, the Garden of Eden, Wonderland as Alice, ancient Egypt, and even prehistoric times. Some of the sequences are side-splitting funny, and Eve isn't at all what I would quite picture her like. Unlike Dragon's Lair I or Space Ace, Dragon's Lair II is much faster paced. There are a lot more moves to do and a lot less time to do it. To help compensate, though, the game helps you out a lot by directions flickering more often to show you the right way to go. Some scenes are downright frantic, like Beethoven's Studio, which is quite a killer scene to watch when you're not actually involved in the action. You can kind of just sit back and take it in. Like Dragon's Lair and Space Ace DVD video games, an on-screen display will appear during the game to tell you when and what to select on your remote control to push. While this may seem like it's kind of cheating, it really isn't, and you'll understand why when you get a chance to play it. When a move is entered, the game hangs for a second. In this fast-moving game, however, this delay is actually sort of welcome. The length of the lag depends a lot on your particular DVD player. Supposedly, the lag is a bit less if you have a newer generation player. Digital Leisure assures me, though, that this is not a problem with their product, but rather an inherent limitation within the DVD player's logic itself. The DVD-ROM version does not experience this lag. In addition to the fast-paced action, there's a secondary goal to the game. Scattered throughout time are several treasures you can collect. For example, when you first go into the castle where the time machine is, there's a bow hanging on the wall. Now, you can simply move the proper direction to keep playing the game and avoid the monsters, and there's no break in the action. However, move towards the bow, and the whole game freezes while you snag the treasure, then it resumes. This all amounts to points, and I do believe in some settings on the original game you're required to collect all of them before being able to go to the final level. To get into more detail of the gameplay would probably be overkill. Chances are likely you've at least seen the game or its predecessors, so I should talk a bit more about the title as a DVD. Included on the disc is a full watchable version of the game from front to back with no deaths. This allows you to plop down on the couch, grab a soda or a beer, whatever you prefer, and watch what you may or may not be able to obtain on your own. It's nice to see the perfect game played before your eyes, and collectors that aren't interested in the game itself will want the DVD just for this full game video. On the previous two DVD offerings from Digital Leisure, they included lots of video footage, essential to any Bluth or Dragon's Lair fan, of TV spots, interviews with Don Bluth and Rick Dyer, etc. This time around, they offered up something totally different. This time they have the game being played before your eyes, but this time the video shifts back and forth to production footage. Sort of like on Ghostbusters, the Ghostbusters DVD, where it shifts between the scene before special effects and then after, and you can use your little multi-angle control to see the two different things. It's like that, but you don't get to control when you change. It's cool, and you get to see the hand-drawn animation clips and the rough sketch anims that they did, and even stock sound footage they used to convey storyline elements. It's quite unusual, and it's very, very cool. Alone, it is worth getting the DVD for. Something interesting about Dragon's Lair II, apparently the animation for this game was done actually in 1984, a year after Dragon's Lair, to follow up the success of its predecessor. However, the video game bust of the 80s pushed the game back to 1991 when it was released through Leyland Video Games and Sullivan Bluth, which is Don Bluth's brother. Suffice to say, you either have to have Dragon's Lair 2 or you will never want it. People seem passionate one way or the other about Laserdisc games. If you're very passionate, you probably already own this title. If you're a classic video game collector heavy into the scene, you'll probably want it, just for the video clips alone. If you're a raster game fan that think interactive movies like Dragon's Lair 2 are boring and don't have enough gameplay, you'll obviously want to pass it by. Want to see more? Get over to digitalleisure.com and check out their online stuff, and then pick the game up on the way off the site. Games on your DVD player. Way too cool.
It's time for an 8-bit flashback.
Quite possibly the first popular role-playing game of all time is Temple of Apshai. With its haunting fantasy music, stats-based character generation, near real-time action, and the great haggling shopkeeper, thou art taking food from my children's mouth, which is actually one of the many things that pushed me into programming to begin with, it redefined what role-playing games are today. Before Temple of Apshai, the same year in fact, we had Telengard, what I considered to be the real first role-playing game, although very few seem to know about this Avalon Hill Classic, excuse me. While Temple of Apshai spawned several direct sequels and many more indirect sequels, Epix figured that with all the action games out there, they could use the popular Apshai name to spawn the action role-playing game that would be often imitated but never properly duplicated, Gateway to Apshai. Released late in 1983, Gateway to Apshai is the definitive action role-playing game. Sure, nowadays we have unbelievable eye feasts like the up-and-coming Diablo II and Westwood Studios' Nox. But when you're talking about an 8-bit graphics action RPG, you've got a pretty big job in front of you. Fortunately, the boys at Epix, the kick-ass group that brought us the graphically astounding game series, Summer Games, Winter Games, World Games, etc., were more than up for the challenge. So let's define action RPG first. An RPG in general is an adventure-style game where the players typically are gauged with statistics or stats, like strength, dexterity, wisdom, etc. The better your stats, typically the better your player gets at hacking and slashing monsters, achieving objectives like picking locked doors, casting spells, etc. Most RPGs are considered near real-time, taking turns based on some sort of timer system. You attack the monster, they attack back. If you don't attack within a certain amount of time, then they attack, etc., etc. Games like Heroes of Might and Magic, that series are deliberately turn-based, giving you a lot of time to react and to thoughtfully plan your attack. Real-time action RPGs are a totally different genre. You have no time to plan. You ready a good solid weapon? You go. Changing weapons, readying spells or items, or even unlocking doors or defusing traps all happens in real time, regardless of the fact that a monster, dead or undead, happens to be kicking your ass. That is action RPG. Diablo is a good example, one of my favorite games of all time. Gateway to Apshai has both stats to better yourself, as well as the constant action element. The best modern-day example of this in the arcade would be Gauntlet Legends. The game spans over so many levels, 16 huge levels to be precise. You'll spend a long time finishing this game. As many games of the genre, you reveal new areas of the dungeon only as you walk into them. Explored areas remain visible the rest of the level, unless you die, of course. You'll restart the level upon death, but you will lose all your mapped regions. You start a single-player game. In fact, the game is completely solo, one player, one character, with a simple melee weapon, dagger, as I recall, and cheesy leather armor. As you explore, you'll find better weapons, magical and non-magical, including armor, shields, the typical D&D fare. You can find various bows, arrows, plus magical arrows to help you even up the fight. Magic is handled through scrolls and potions, the standard use it once and it's gone variety. There are a number of spells, more powerful, of course, the higher up you get. Stun, flash, freeze, standard, guard variety, Dungeons & Dragons type spells. Weapons, once obtained, must be readied to be used. Bows and arrows are included in this. This proves to make life interesting once you enter a room to find a fast-moving mamba snake coming after you. You can only have one item ready at a time, in fact, and this includes spells and your only means of hit point recovery, salves, and potions. While the game itself is joystick-controlled, you'll need nimble fingers to deftly change weapons and get potions into your body to stay alive through difficult situations. I would like to take a moment to point out, and you can put this in plug mode, that modern PC arcade controllers, like the Stick-It, Custom Arcade, Hot Rod, etc., make games like this so much more fun to play. You can assign weapon changes to button 2, item changes to button 3. This gives you an excellent advantage never intended by the programmers. Just another way modern technology helps out the classic gamer. End of arcade control plug. There are coffers scattered throughout the levels, many containing treasure for points, in addition to the weapons and other standard fare. Coffins can, however, be trapped, and only by wasting time using your search for traps ability will you find traps, and even that is no guarantee you'll actually find them, even if you do look for them. It's worth pointing out that the traps can also be randomly scattered throughout the dungeon, next to walls, on the floor and ceiling. You'll find yourself often taking the defensive approach by searching a room for traps, be going too far into it, especially if you happen to be low on hit points. This, of course, takes time. You are on a timer of sorts to get through the dungeon level, otherwise you're immediately shoveled to the next hard level. So you want to make sure you get through the dungeon and get all the goods. The last element of the game is secret doors. Using your search ability, you can find secret doors to great treasures and even greater monsters. As your abilities, stats, get better, you will have a better chance of finding these doors and traps. Combat. Combat is well handled, and it's done seemingly through a pretty decent algorithm. Your stats, the weapon type, the monster type, the the proximity of your weapon to the monster, etc., are all taken into account when attacking a monster. And remember, this isn't real time. If you just sit there, sword in hand, without doing anything, the monster's going to whoop your ass. As a new adventurer with a crappy dagger, you'll find out that your your hits don't often meet their mark. While your on-screen persona doesn't change visually with different weapons, your ability to hit your mark drastically improves as you get better weapons and stats. There are about 8 different graphics representing roughly 20 different monsters. The harder monsters that use the same graphics are faster and more powerful than their counterparts. For example, the garter snake uses the same graphics as the mama snake, but believe me, you'll be begging for garter snakes after you have your first mama snake encounter. Gateway to Apshai is one of the classics that helped shape the genre of video games as we know it today. It is still to this day very fun to play, and it took me a long time to write this review, actually, because I was busy playing it. But even more fun now that I can map the odd controls for inventory control to my extra buttons on my PC arcade controller. As usual, we'll have the disk image available for you to download with this episode on the RetroGaming Radio site for use with your favorite C64 emulator. I recommend you use CCS64, the latest version, so you can use the freeze state function to save your game, as it were. Next on the agenda, I'd like to talk about the Intellivision Lives CD. Just a little flashback, though, to about a year ago. On a previous Retro Radio show, I made a prediction that the legal crackdown of classic gaming emulation was the start of a whole new retro gaming craze. That despite the fact that the only reason that there was a the retro craze now was because of the early legally gray backyard emulation scene that many companies took heavy litigious action against. In fact, stomping out the very hands that fed the retro gaming scene. I can tell you folks that many people in the emulation scene made it abundantly clear that they would boycott any products from these legal style companies, which might well account for the early failures of commercial emulation packages. The other side of the coin, however, are the good number of people that vowed that if there was a cost-effective, legal method of playing these emulated games, they would support fully the efforts of these classic game manufacturers. In previous shows, I set forth the edict, this is supported by dozens of different classic gamers, by the way, that the best way to support the discriminative classic gamer is to offer an inexpensive online means of buying a license to individual game ROMs for immediate download and play on the huge number of free emulators out there. Collections and compilations tend to offer the gamer 1 or 2 titles they desire and 5 to 10 games that they don't care about, nor will they ever for that matter. But by offering the titles individually, you give the gamer what they want, you have no overhead of packaging and distribution, and you could join forces with other classic gaming companies and build a classic gaming empire based on the internet. Alas, companies continue to do things the old-fashioned way, and they put 10 games per collection on CD and sell it for more than it's worth if you split it up, with a cheesy front end, if any, no extras, and endless compatibility issues. One company, however, Intellivision Productions, has started to break the mold on compilations without value, with its first release, Intellivision Lives, subtitled Volume 1. If you're going to do it the old-fashioned way, the right way to do that is to give the gamer the best value for your dollar. How do you do that? First, you don't charge 40 plus bucks for it. No one wants 5 Konami games for 50 bucks. You give the gamer a lot of games, and you give them a lot of background on their games, the programmers, the company behind the games, and you got to give it to them in a way that's easy to use. We're talking about Joe Q Public here, and compatible with the hardware that they have. And this is exactly what Intellivision Lives delivers. As the name suggests, this collection contains Intellivision games. Remember that quirky, popular video game console of the early 80s that fell somewhere between the Atari 2600 and the ColecoVision. What Intellivision had going for it, though, at the time was better than Atari graphics, the first game system to offer speech synthesis, and a staff of fresh, out-of-the-college programmers ready to offer cutting-edge games to an Atari-drenched market. First, how many games do you get with Intellivision Lives? Not 20, not 30, not 40, not even 50. How about more than 50? And I actually haven't sat down and counted them all up, but I know it's more than 50. And it isn't all the games that you hated on the Intellivision, although there are a couple of personal favorites that, due to licensing restrictions, were unable to be included, like the Tron games. You get all the greatest titles in television history, like Armor Battle and B-17 Bomber and Frog Bog, Skiing. In fact, just about every other sporting game is included. Sea Battle, Space Battle, Sub Hunt, Vectron, and dozens of other games, both released and unreleased games. That's right, you get games that never made it past marketing. And I know what it's like trying to get something past marketing. Or they were just made when the game system was right on its way out. You know, when the big video game crash in the 80s happened. Now, it's good to know that these games are not simulations. They're not rewritten code. These are emulated via the only Intellivision emulator out there. NEPC is what I call it, developed by the company's own Blue Sky Rangers, Carl Mueller Jr., which, as I recall, was actually a freebie emulator before the company decided to go commercial. The only downer of this emulator is that it is DOS-based. However, I can honestly say after testing the package on a good half dozen machines that it's quite happy with most configurations out there under Windows 95 and 98. The small miracle on itself. Naturally, being DOS, this emulator will not function in Windows NT or Windows 2000. The DOS-EMU does work very well with the Intellivision Liv's front end. In fact, it's very seamless and never obtrusive. In fact, you'll quickly forget that the emulator is DOS-based. It's that well put together. Now, it's about the front end. Let's talk about that. That's pretty much what people see and what people judge an entire package on, regardless of how important it is to the actual package. It's a very nice, clean interface done with Macromedia products. Very easy to navigate. Includes a very appreciated, handy, all-encompassing index of all the material on the CD, including games that can be played, video clips that can be watched, interviews with Intellivision team members. Heck, there are even TV commercial video clips on the CD. Some that were shown, some that weren't shown, all available through the interface. You can also access them directly from the CD in your favorite player. Now, not only can you learn about the games, but see pictures of the box, screen snapshots from the game, overlays for the real Intellivision controller, cool, often unusual information about the game. Plus they can show you slideshows of the hardware, Intellivision past, present, future. Of course, of that time frame. There's a lot of extras. Let's just put it that way. It goes on and on and on. The more extras you see, it's just stunning. Okay, now I've got to give you the con side of it. There's one thing I do have to whine and moan about, lest I give you a somewhat journalistically irresponsible review of the CD. During the initial install of the package, most of it runs straight from the CD, you are required to install a 16-bit, very old version of QuickTime, even if you have the latest version of QuickTime on your system. They assure you that this will coexist peacefully with your existing QuickTime, and you really have no choice but to do it if you want to use the CD. I'm afraid this isn't completely true. On one or two of the roughly 6 systems I tried the package on, there were QuickTime issues caused by the installation of the Intellivision Live CD. Now, these were quickly restored by reinstalling my existing version of QuickTime. I really hate 16-bit Windows software, folks. Nothing but trouble. As a professional PC technician, I could attribute more than half of my service calls relating to 16-bit nasty Windows software causing the problem. Now, this is the only bad thing about this package, I have to say, and it's more of an inconvenience than a really big hit. But for the average Joe Q public with no PC troubleshooting experience, well, this could be frustrating. I really hope that the next volume of Intellivision Lives will fix this issue. Heck, use Windows Media Player or QuickTime Pro, or at least version check to ensure that the version that the user has on his system is capable of playing back your videos. At the very least, you've got to allow the front end to work and provide emulation services for those that don't care about the videos but would rather use the product. Yes, if you're a good enough hacker, so to speak, you can get in and use the emulator without the front end. Yes, you can go to the media folder and watch the movies, but all the front end features will be lost. Now, that's not good for a commercial product designed for the masses. But enough about that bad talk. I don't want to end this review on a sour note, because overall this is a great package. Intellivision Lives is one packed CD. And this just isn't about emulation, folks, but this is like a slice of history properly presented. The company, the games, the programmers, the hardware, collectors of classic video game systems like myself will find this disc a lasting reference tool of the 80s video game age. The history and videos alone are worth the paltry price of, get this, $29.95. And that's manufacturer select, recommended price direct from the company. Suggested retail price. You can buy it from the company for $29.95. And while playing the game is fun too, myself, I like it for the historical representation that it is. When you talk about emulation bang for the buck, you're talking about Intellivision Lives. And for you PlayStation fanatics, there's a version of Intellivision Lives for the PlayStation. Now, I don't personally have it, but if Intellivision Production sends a copy over, I'll happily review it for a future show. The PC CD that I have is a hybrid, so you can play it both on the PC and on the Power PC Macintosh, too. But I can never promise a Mac review, folks, since I don't have a Mac. Makes sense. If you're just getting your feet wet with commercial classic gaming, this is a great place to start. If you're a collector of retro gaming, you can't live without this disc, folks. Heck, if you graduated high school anytime in the mid to late 80s, you'll find this disc a great jolt of memories of a simpler age. The nice thing is that this package will play on older computers, too, as an Intellivision or any other, early console emulator should, running on a sparse P90 running Windows 95 or 98. Ew, Windows 98 on a P90. Kind of makes you want to puke just thinking about it, doesn't it? Sort of like running a marathon in a swimming pool. But anyway, Intellivision Lives, package rocks, get it. Well, folks, I didn't mean to run the show quite this long. I've been trying to kind of cut back on the show links a little bit so I could do more quality content and get you a better interface. But I do want to get a couple of quick news items in before I go. First, remember that kick-ass game show in the 80s called Starcade, where the kids would play video games for prizes? They identify screens and answer trivia questions. I can't speak for the rest of the baby boomer era, but my arse was planted in a chair each and every Saturday to watch that show. I distinctly remember the Dragon Slayer episode, which incidentally is show 99, compliments of the website, when they gave away a pristine Dragon Slayer video game machine. I thought I was going to die. I was so envious. Well, JM Productions, the producer of the show, are on the web and are offering their shows on videotape for sale. Check out their site and catch a truncated version of a full show, kind of time compressed, video clips describing a lot of the games, and there's just a ton of crap there for you to look at. It's awesome. You got to go check it out. Believe me, you'll feel hurtled back in time watching this stuff. Hey, they even have a little shockwave version of the game to play where you can identify screenshots. Unfortunately, it's the same game every time, but that's okay. It's fun to play the first time. Anyway, check out the links list on the accompanying show to find out how to get to that website. Second, a little update on our own Amiga Emulation Zone. We now have over 125 titles for download, 50-plus Amiga CD covers, plus news, the whole bit. You Amiga emulation heads, come check us out. Hey, for those of you who haven't checked out the Retro Times newsletter, you should. It's a nice little periodic with a lot of good news and information for retro gamers. It's been around a few years, and it's worth checking out. We'll provide a link. Well, folks, I think I'm going to wrap this up. Time constraints abound. Thanks for listening to another episode of Retro Gaming Radio. We couldn't do this show without the support of not only the commercial classic gaming community, but the classic gaming community that's on the web, in the scene, and, of course, you, the listener, the average guy that's just kicking back, trying to enjoy some of the fun the retro gaming brings you. Thanks to everybody who makes this show possible. Until next episode, folks, keep it retro.